I lost a $12,000 deal because I sold the wrong thing. Not the wrong product, the wrong category of thing. Guy came in for personal training, mid 40s, two young kids, stressed and out of shape. And I pitched him 4 sessions a week. Periodization, progressive overload, the whole program. He nodded, asked good questions, but then walked out and never came back. Weeks later, I found out he signed up with a different fitness consultant. Same gym, same price, but here's what she sold him. She sold him the energy to keep up with his kids, to throw a ball without being winded, to go on hikes without needing to stop, to be the dad who plays, not the dad who watches. She sold him a verb when I sold him a noun. Same service, but different frame, and a $1,500 commission check gone. That lesson cost me money, but it taught me something I've used ever since. The ground is moving beneath your prospects' feet. Everything they thought was stable, their market, their tools, their competitive advantage, is turning into something else. And right now, while you're standing in front of them, pitching a static solution to a dynamic problem, they won't commit because you're offering them a rock to stand on in the middle of an earthquake. So they say, let me think about it. And what they mean is I don't trust that what you're selling me today will be relevant tomorrow. If you've ever lost a deal you should have won and couldn't figure out why, this is the episode for you. Because what I'm about to share didn't come from a sales book. It came from a futurist who's been predicting technological shifts for 30 years.
Welcome to the Sales Evolution Lab, exploring the science of selling, from past wisdom to future innovation.
I'm Kyle Mackey, and today we're talking about Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable. Kelly is the founding editor of Wired magazines. He's spent decades studying how technology shapes human behavior. He doesn't give a shit about quotas. He's not writing about closing techniques or objection handling. He's writing about the fundamental forces that are reshaping everything. How we work, how we buy, how we think. And when I read this book, I didn't learn sales tactics. I learned why certain tactics work. And more importantly, why certain tactics are about to stop working. Here is the core insights that frame everything else. We are living through a phase of transition, like water turning into steam. The old rules don't just bend, they evaporate. And Kelly calls it moving from a world of nouns to a world of verbs. Products are becoming processes. Ownership is becoming access. Finishing things are becoming continuous flows. And the salespeople who keep selling nouns, static, finished, owned things, is going to get destroyed by the rep who sells verbs. I know that sounds abstract, but let me make it concrete. You used to sell a car to someone, a noun, a thing they owned. Now you sell them mobility, a verb, a process they access. You used to sell someone software, a noun, a box on a shelf. Now you sell them computing, a verb, a service that evolves. You used to sell someone a gym membership, a noun, access to a building. Now you sell them a transformation, a verb, a journey with no end. The shift isn't just happening in tech, it's happening in every industry, every market, every buyer's mind. And if you don't shift with it, you become like I was with that $12,000 client selling a rock in an earthquake. By the end of this episode, you'll have 6 upgrades to your operating system. The Endless Newbie Principle, why your prospect feels stupid and how to become their guide instead of their teacher. The filter economy, why attention is the new currency and how to become an algorithm that saves your buyer's sanity. The access rebellion, why ownership is a burden and how to sell freedom from the weight of having. The Centaur Strategy, how to partner with AI instead of competing against it. The Immersion Imperative, why passive pitches are dead and how to make your prospect feel the decision in their body. And the Tracking Transparency Flip, why your buyer already knows everything and how radical honesty becomes your weapon. 6 forces, 6 shifts. Now let's get into it. So here's something I wish someone had told me years ago. Your prospect has no idea what they're doing, and neither do you. That's not an insult. It's biology meeting technology at a speed neither were designed for. Kevin Kelly calls this the endless newbie condition. Every day, new tools appear, new platforms, new ways of doing things that were literally impossible last year. Everything updates constantly. Softwares you mastered last quarter has a completely different interface this quarter. The rules keep changing, and it's exhausting for everyone. Your prospect wakes up every morning already behind. They've got emails from vendors pitching solutions they don't understand. Their competitors are using tools they haven't heard of. Their boss is asking about strategies they can't even pronounce. And somewhere deep in their gut is this low-grade anxiety, this constant hum that says, I should know more than I do. The buyer's fear that you'll hear is, I'm not sure I fully understand what we'd even be getting. That's not an objection, that's a confession, and most reps miss it completely. I see this in my own industry. See, I've been in fundraising since about 2010. And here's the dirty secret. We're using the exact same tools we used when tablets first became a thing. I spoke at a conference last year, and I said that the system is sort of broken. Nothing talks to each other, and it's costing charities millions. I'm sure that rant may have upset some people, but it's the same panic your prospect feels about their own industry. Kelly's point is brutal, and the rate of change is accelerating. We're all going to be newbies forever, not because we're slow, but because the current is too damn fast. Now, most salespeople respond to this wrong. They try to be the expert. They walk in there, chest puffed out, ready to teach. Let me show you how this works. Here's why you need this feature. Allow me to educate you on the landscape. Now stop doing this, walking in as the teacher, because you just reminded them of how stupid they feel. Nobody wants to feel like the dumbest person in the room, especially not someone with a title and a salary. The Endless Newbie Principle flips the script. You don't walk in as the expert who knows everything. You walk in as the guide who's already been lost in this jungle and found the path. An expert says, here's what you need to know. A guide says, I was confused by this too. Here's what actually worked. An expert positions himself above, where a guide positions himself beside. I learned this at Movati Athletics when I was 21. There was this guy who came in for a consultation, successful, clearly made good money, had the energy of someone who'd been used to being the smartest person in the room. And I could tell he was embarrassed that he let himself go, embarrassed to be sitting across from some kid in a polo shirt. My first instinct was to impress him, throw around some exercise science, talk about periodization and macros, make him respect me. And I watched his face close like a door. So I stopped, took a breath, and I said something I hadn't planned. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. This industry makes it seem like everyone's got it figured out. But that's not true. So forget the textbook. Tell me what's really going on. His posture changed. The wall came down. He started talking about his stress, his travel schedule, his dad who just had a heart attack. Stuff that never would have come out if I kept playing expert. That's the Endless Newbie Principle in action. Your buyer doesn't need another teacher making them feel dumb. They need a guide who's been lost and found their way. Here's your action. Before your next conversation, identify one thing you were confused about in your own industry, something recent. Then find a natural moment to share it. That one line does more for trust than 20 slides of expertise. But here's the problem. Even if you become the perfect guide, your prospect is still drowning in noise. They're getting pitched by 17 vendors. They're reading 30 thought leaders' pieces a week from LinkedIn gurus who've never actually sold anything. And if you can't cut through that noise, your guidance never gets heard. Every single day, an absurd amount of data gets created, more than any human could process in a lifetime. Your prospect doesn't just have options. They have infinite options. And infinite options is another way of saying infinite paralysis. Kevin puts it like this. We are drowning in the library of everything. Millions of new songs every year, millions of new books, hundreds of thousands of new products. And somewhere in that ocean, your solution is floating. One voice amongst millions, screaming into a hurricane. And here's what that means for your prospect's brain. They don't have more choices. They have more anxiety because every choice they make means 1,000 choices they didn't. And humans hate missing out more than they love gaining. Deep inside your buyer's mind, what they might be telling themselves is that they want to make sure they're not missing something better. And that's not due diligence, that's paralysis dressed up as professionalism. The old solution was information. Give them more data, more features, more comparison. Help them make an informed decision. But information isn't the currency anymore. Attention is. Nobel laureate Herbert Simon said it back in 1971. A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Your prospect isn't suffering from a lack of options. They're suffering from a lack of bandwidth. They're cognitively depleted. And you, walking in with a 65 slide deck is like handing a glass of water to a drowning person. You've got to stop doing that. You've got to stop presenting more than 3 options because the rep who wins in this filter economy isn't the one with the most information. It's the one who removes information. You have to become the algorithm in the room. Think about how Amazon works. They don't show you everything. They show you what people like you bought. And recommendation engine like that drives a massive portion of their sales. Not products, curation. I remember a moment at an Auckland shopping center that taught me this back in 2021. I was talking to a woman in her mid-40s about supporting a charity, monthly donations. She wanted to help, and you could see it in her eyes. But every time I tried to move forward, she'd ask another question. What about this program versus that one? What if I wanted to switch later? After about 10 minutes, I realized what was happening. She wasn't objecting, she was drowning. We had different giving levels on the table, $40, $50, $60, different programs. I was giving her information, and information was making everything worse. Death by options. So I stopped, and I said something I hadn't planned. Can I be honest with you? You're overthinking this. Based on what you've told me, there's really only one option that makes sense. Everything else is just noise. Her shoulders dropped, like a weight came off. That's all I needed to hear. And she signed. Not because I gave her more, because I gave her less. So here's a tactical tool. It's the curation framework. Never present more than 3 options, and never present them as equal. Label them by outcome, not by features. Option 1 is the safe bet. It's what most people in your position choose. Option 2 is the middle ground. More commitment, but this specific advantage. Option 3 is the bigger commitment. It's where the real impact happens. When you present options this way, you're not dumping data, you're filtering reality. You're saying, I did the work so you don't have to. So here's your next action. Before your next presentation, audit your material. How many options are you presenting? Now cut it in half. Then cut it again. Find 3 things that actually matter for this buyer. And steal this line. Based on what you've shared, here's what you need to be looking at. That sentence is worth more than 50 slides. But even when you filter perfectly, there's still a barrier. The prospect doesn't just fear making the wrong choice, they fear being stuck with it. Your prospect doesn't want to buy your product. They want to use your product. There's a difference. And if you don't understand that difference, you're going to keep losing deals to people who do. Kevin Kelly describes a massive shift happening beneath the surface of every market, from ownership to access, from nouns to verb, from being a farmer who hoards assets to being a hunter-gatherer who travels light. When someone buys something, they're not just paying for the product. They're taking on a backpack full of burdens, maintenance, storage, depreciation, the fear that what they just bought will be obsolete in 6 months. And the fear that's going on is this. They're telling themselves, what happens if this product doesn't work out? Are we stuck with it? That's not about the product. That's about the weight. Kelly uses this example that stuck with me. In 1950, a beer can weighed 73 grams, heavy steel. But today, that same can weighs only 13 grams. What happened to that missing 60 grams? They were replaced by intelligence, better design, smarter engineering. The value shifted from the atom to the idea. That's happening to everything. The stuff is getting lighter, the intelligence is getting heavier, and the customer doesn't want to own the stuff. They want access to the intelligence. Think about your own life. You probably don't own a DVD collection anymore. You subscribe to Netflix. You probably don't own a music library. You subscribe to Spotify. You might not even own a car. Why would you maintain, insure, and store a depreciating asset when you can summon transportation on demand? Now apply that to your prospect. You walk in trying to sell them something to own, something to implement, something to maintain, something that will eventually become a legacy burden. So here's something you need to stop doing. Stop using possessive language, such as buy, own, install, implement. The objection they give you is price. It's too expensive. That's bullshit. The real objection is weight. I don't want to carry this. I don't want to be stuck with it. I saw this playing out running my fundraising company. We were asking people to commit to monthly donations, $50 a month. And some people would hesitate, not because they didn't care, not because they couldn't afford it, but because the word monthly felt heavy, permanent, tied down. So here's what I learned to do. I stopped selling the commitment and I started selling the flexibility. Same donation, but different frame. The weight disappeared and people signed. Kelly tells a story about the future of access. He describes a young professional who lives in a housing complex designed entirely around the subscription model. When he needs a turkey fryer for a dinner party, he taps a screen. A pristine fryer arrives within an hour. He uses it and then he returns it. No cleaning, no storage, no ownership. His father asks if he feels irresponsible for not owning anything. And the guy says, I feel the opposite. I feel like I'm an ancient hunter-gatherer who owns nothing but has access to everything. It's the farmer who needs the barn. I travel light. That's your prospect's fantasy. They don't want to be farmers. They want to be hunters. And here's the tactical translation. The usage versus the possession audit. Look at your pitch. Count possession words, buy, own, install, and replace them with process words like subscribe, access, leverage. Same product, different frame. The weight disappears. And here's your action. Take your core pitch and rewrite it using only process language. Kill the nouns and replace them with verbs. Then say it out loud. Feel how much lighter it sounds. But here's the challenge. You can sell access, you can sell process, and your prospect will still have one nagging fear. If everything becomes automated, what happens to me? So, in 1997, Garry Kasparov, the greatest chess player who ever lived, lost to a machine. Deep Blue beat him, and for a moment it felt like the funeral for human relevance. But here's what nobody talks about. The humans found a way back. Kevin Kelly calls this force cognifying, making everything smart, adding artificial intelligence to every process, every tool, every job. Kelly predicted AI would become as cheap and ubiquitous as electricity. And that's the direction we're headed. AI is becoming a utility, something you plug into, not something you buy. Now, here's where most salespeople start to sweat. And honestly, this is a big part of why I created this podcast in the first place. If machines can process data faster, analyze better, recommend smarter, what's left for us? Now, here's something that might cross your buyer's brain. They might be thinking we're evaluating some AI tools that might handle this internally. That's not about budget. That's about your relevance. Kelly's point is clear. If your value is not moving information around, the machine will eat it faster, cheaper, and it won't need a salary or a commission check. So you need to stop doing this. You need to stop competing with AI on information delivery. But here's what the machines can't do. They can't feel the room. They can't sense that the CFO is nervous about something she hadn't said. They can't pick up on the micro expressions that reveal the real objections. They can't build trust. This is where the Centaur strategy comes in. After Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, he didn't retire. He reinvented freestyle chess. In freestyle chess, you could compete as a human, as a computer, or as a team of both. And here's what they found in freestyle tournaments. The best pure AI engines performed well, but the Centaur human-machine hybrid consistently outperformed them. And the winning teams were always the ones with the most computing power. They were the ones who knew when to trust the AI and when to override it. Now think about what that means today. Everyone has access to powerful AI tools. Your prospect can use the same technology you use. Your competitor can run the same research. The barrier to entry has collapsed, which means the only differentiator left is the human filter, the judgment, the intuition, the read. That's the future of sales. You're not going to out-analyze the algorithm. That race is over. But you can become a centaur. Use the machine to handle the logic and bring the human element that the machine can't touch. I remember a conversation in a shopping center in Brisbane. I was fundraising, talking to a man in his 60s, retired, comfortable, had time to chat. He said he was interested in supporting the charity, but something felt off. He kept glancing back towards the walkway. His body was angled like part of him wanted to leave. And when I asked him about making a donation, he said yes, but his voice was flat. If I'd been a machine operating purely on he said yes, proceed to close, I would have pushed forward, but I'm not a machine. So I stopped and said, "You said yes, but you don't seem sure. What aren't we talking about?" Then there was a long pause, and then he told me about his wife who had Alzheimer's. She was at a home with a caretaker, and he couldn't be away for long. He wanted to help, but his real focus was on taking care of her. And I said something I normally wouldn't say. Don't donate today. Take care of your wife. And I gave him my number. And then I said, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, give me a call. He teared up, said no one had talked to him like that for many months. 6 weeks later, he actually called. His wife had passed, and so he wanted to sponsor 3 children in her memory. That's the Centaur strategy. The machine would have closed the first conversation and lost the relationship, but the human felt the room and earned something bigger. So here's an action you can take. Before your next conversation, use AI to do the analytical heavy lifting. Research the company, map the landscape. Then forget about proving what you know. Use that information to ask better questions, because the AI gives you the data, but only the human can feel the meaning. And if you want to stay ahead of how AI is reshaping sales, then definitely keep listening to this podcast, because that's exactly why I'm making it. But even if you're the perfect centaur, there is still a barrier. Your prospect is trained to be passive. They sit, they watch, they judge. And passive prospects don't buy. They think about it, and then they disappear. There's a lab at a Stanford University where they do experiments with VR. One involves a wooden plank sitting on the floor. Totally safe. They put a VR headset on someone, and suddenly that plank is suspended over a 30-meter drop. People's knees shake. Their palms sweat. They physically cannot make their feet move. They know it's not real, and their conscious brain is screaming, "You're standing on carpet." Yet they still can't do it because the body overrides the logic. That's the power of immersion. Kevin Kelly calls it the interacting force. We are moving from a passive consumption to an active engagement, touching, moving, feeling. And if your sales process doesn't account for this shift, you're going to keep losing to people who do. Kelly tells this slightly concerning story about a little girl, maybe 3 years old. She walks up to a TV and she touches the screen. She swipes it, looks behind it. When it doesn't respond, she turns to her father and says, "Daddy, broken." This kid has never known a screen that didn't talk back. And when she encounters one that's just static, she thinks it's malfunctioning. And this is a similar feeling that your buyer might have. They might be thinking, this all makes sense, but I'm just not feeling it yet. And that's not indecision. That's their primitive brain saying, nothing's happened to me. That's your prospect being trained by things like Netflix and Spotify and Amazon, technology that responds. And then they walk into your sales meeting where you deliver this PowerPoint presentation, where they sit down, they watch, they listen. So what you need to stop doing is presenting while they speculate. Their primitive brain doesn't consciously think this is boring. It instinctively thinks this is broken. Here's what that Stanford VR lab proves. Logic is weak, but experience is absolute. You can tell someone a solution will work, and you can show them the data, and their conscious brain will nod. But their primitive brain, the one that actually makes decisions, hasn't been touched. To move to the primitive brain, you have to create presence. I learned this at Movati Athletics. We had consultation rooms, little offices where we'd sit across the desk, show pricing sheets, walk through packages, very professional, very passive, typical close rates. But then one day, the AC broke. So I took my prospect out onto the gym floor. We sat on some equipment. I had him try a few exercises, let him feel what training session would actually be like. And that conversation closed in half the time with twice the enthusiasm. It wasn't because the pitch was better. It was because he felt it. His body knew what his brain was still calculating. And here's the tactical principle. If your prospect is only using their eyes and ears, they're in a passive mode. You have to activate their hands, their body, their movement. And so next time you have a potential prospect instead of you, say something like this. Instead of me showing you, why don't you just give it a try? That's what shifts them from judging to deciding. Here's your action. Take whatever you're selling and ask, how can I make them touch it? If it's software, let them give it a try. Hand them the keyboard. If it's a service, give them a sample. If it's a physical product, put it in their hands. And then ask yourself, is this presentation stuck in the fingertips or does it engage the whole body? Now, even if you master immersion, there is one more barrier. Your prospect doesn't just evaluate your product, they evaluate you, and they've already done their research. Your prospect has already Googled you. They've read the reviews. They've checked your LinkedIn. If there's something negative out there about your company, they've probably seen it. And they're waiting to see if you'll be honest about it. Kevin calls this the tracking era. Everything that can be measured will be measured. Everything that can be known will be known. And the power asymmetry that used to favor the salesperson, the black box of information, the secrets we kept about pricing, competition, and flaws, well, that's gone. Kelly uses this metaphor where he has you imagine a small American town in the 1950s. Your neighbor watched you come and go. She knew when you went to the doctor. It sounds invasive, but you watched her too. It was mutual. And that mutuality created trust. Kelly's point is that the digital world is turning global commerce into that small town. Everybody's watching everyone. And trying to hide isn't just ineffective, it's suicidal. Because your buyer often has this fear where they say, we saw some things online. We're going to do some more research. That's not curiosity. That's a test you're about to fail. And I learned this through watching what happens when transparency doesn't exist. In my industry, there are charities with amazing reputations, and then there's charities with challenges, public complaints, news stories, questions about how money is used. When you're representing one of those organizations, you have a choice. pretend that the controversy doesn't exist, or address it heads on. And I've tried both. And when you pretend it doesn't exist, here's what happens. The conversation goes fine. You think you're about to close. And then they say, I saw these things online. I'm going to do some more research. And then they're gone because they already knew. They were testing you and you failed. The modern buyer has one question underneath every other question. Can I trust this person? And the fastest way to build trust in an era of total transparency is to be more transparent than they'd expect. So here's a tactical approach: the transparent opening. Before your prospect can Google your weakness, own them. If you've looked into us online, you might have seen a specific issue. Here's what happened, what we learned, and what's different now. That positions you as a rare salesperson who's honest enough to bring up their own flaws. That's differentiation you can't buy. Now, here's your action. Before your next big conversation, Google yourself. Google your company. Read the negative reviews. Then write out how you would proactively address each one, because they're going to find it anyway. The only question is whether you bring it up like someone with integrity, or you get caught like someone who's been trying to hide something. Now, we've covered 5 forces, 5 shifts, reshaping how your prospect thinks, buys, and trusts. But there's one more, and it might be the most important. Your prospect isn't buying a product. They're buying a process. They're not investing in what it is. They're investing in what it's becoming. And if you can't sell the journey, you'll keep losing to people who can. This is the core of Kevin Kelly's thesis. We are moving from fixed nouns to fluid verbs. The product you sell today will be different tomorrow, updated, upgraded, evolved. And your prospect knows this. That's why the old close, buy this thing and you're done, doesn't land anymore. Because they're not done. They're never done. The thing they buy will change. Their needs will change. The market will change. And the buyer may have the fear that what if this becomes outdated in a year? That's not skepticism. That's the only rational response to a world that won't sit still. And if what you're selling can't change with them, they're going to hesitate. Now, what you need to stop doing is pitching your product as finished. Kelly uses this concept he calls protopia. It's not utopia, some perfect end state. It's not dystopia, some catastrophic collapse. It's something in between, a state of continuous becoming, where things get a little better than yesterday, and a little different too. Your prospect lives in a protopia. And the question they're really asking, the one underneath all of the other questions, is, will this thing evolve with me? I remember a conversation in Auckland where this clicked. I was talking to a business owner about supporting a charity, monthly donations, 40 or 50 bucks a month. And he said something that surprised me. Look, I want to help, but my business is changing so fast. I don't know what my situation will be in 6 months. How do I commit to something ongoing when I can't even predict my own future? He wasn't objecting to the cause. He was objecting to the permanence. So I reframed it. Think of this less like a commitment and more like a relationship. Relationships evolve. If your situation changes, we adjust. You're not locking yourself in. You're joining a process that will grow with you. And you should use that line. You're not locking in. You're joining a process that will grow with you. When I did this guy's posture changed. That's actually how I think about everything now. Nothing's permanent. Everything's a process. He signed. Not because the commitment was less, but because the framing matched his worldview. And here's the deeper principle. Kelly says we're moving from selling products to selling becoming. You're not selling a server, you're selling computing. You're not selling a camera, you're selling tracking. You're not selling a contract, you're selling becoming. The tactical translation is the continuous upgrade frame. Stop describing what your product is and start describing what it's becoming. That frame removes the fear of obsolescence. If they're subscribing to an evolution, they know they'll always have the latest. So here's an action you can take. Take your core product and describe it as a verb instead of a noun. We don't sell software. We sell continuous optimization. We don't sell training. We sell ongoing development. Then use the language in your next conversation and watch how the fear of commitment softens. Now, we've covered a lot. 6 forces, 6 shifts in how the buyer's brain actually works now. But knowing isn't the same as doing. So before we close, I want to give you the briefing you take into every conversation from now on, the pre-flight checklist. The 6 things you actually do before you walk into a room. Force number 1, the endless newbie. Your prospect feels stupid and overwhelmed. They're never going to admit it, but they do. So stop playing the expert and become the guide who's been lost and found the way. Before every meeting, identify one recent thing that confused you in your industry, and then find a moment to share it. Force number 2, the filter economy. Attention is scarce. Options are infinite. Your prospect is drowning in choices, so stop presenting menus and become the algorithm. Before every meeting, cut your presentation in half, then cut it again, and find the 3 things that matter. Label them by outcome. Step number 3, the access rebellion. Ownership is a burden. Possession creates anxiety, so stop using possessive language. Before every meeting, audit your pitch. Kill words like buy, own, install, and replace them with subscribe, access, and leverage. Force number 4, the Centaur Strategy. AI handles data, and you handle humans. Everyone has the same AI tools now. The only differentiator is the human filter. So stop competing with machines on information. And before every meeting, let AI do the research, then forget about proving what you know. Focus on what you feel in the room. Force number 5, the Immersion Imperative. Passive prospects don't buy. Static presentations fail. So stop presenting while they speculate. Before every meeting, ask yourself, how can I make them participate instead of watch? And then force number 6, the transparency flip. They already know your weaknesses. They've done their homework. So stop hoping they don't bring up the negative stuff. Before every meeting, Google your company. Know the complaints. Have the honest answers ready. That's your pre-conversation checklist. 6 questions every meeting. That's the toolkit for selling in the inevitable future. Now, at the start of this episode, I told you about losing a $12,000 deal. I sold him 4 sessions a week, but she sold him the energy to keep up with his kids. Same service, but different frame. Noun versus verb. That lesson cost me money, but it taught me something I've used ever since. The world is shifting from nouns to verbs, from products to processes, from ownership to access, from expertise to guidance. And the salesperson who keeps selling yesterday's way in tomorrow's world is going to get left behind. But the salesperson who understands the inevitable, who adapts to it, flows with it, and becomes part of it, is going to thrive. So stop selling what is and start selling what's becoming. If this resonated, share it with someone who's feeling the ground shift underneath their feet. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe. This has been the Sales Evolution Lab podcast, exploring the science of selling from past wisdom to future innovation. I'm Kyle Mackey, and I'll see you in the next episode.